Welcome to the Artemis Leadership Series. This is part 2, Stepping Up for Service, and we have a terrific panel here to talk to us today about what boards actually need from their members and where to look for opportunities. We will discuss both boards of directors for nonprofit organizations and state boards like commissions and councils for fish and game. If you have questions, please submit them in the Q&A or drop them in the chat. Again, the panel may not be able to get to them today, but other participants might be able to contribute. And as I mentioned before, we will keep track of your questions and either respond after the training or use it to inform future events. So let's go and head on over to our wonderful panelists. Thank you so much for being here today and for showing up as leaders in this space, in addition to all the other spaces you show up in. We have a lot to learn from you, and we are going to prick your brain as much as we can in the next hour. Thank you for letting us do that. Let's start by having each of you please take a minute or two to tell us who you are, where you are, and maybe a few sentences about your experiences with boards. Camilla, let's go ahead and start with you, and then could you pass it to the next panelist, which maybe we can go more in depth. We'll see how it all plays out, but Camilla, go ahead and get us started.
Sure. Yep. Good morning, everybody. I'm Camilla Simon. I'm the executive director of HECHO, which is Hispanics Enjoying Camping, Hunting, and the Outdoors. I am normally in Virginia on the East Coast, but today I am in California, so on Pacific Coast time. I'm spending some time with family here. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Marcia, and I'm really proud to be among the women of this panel and as part of this session. And hi to everybody who's joined. This is going to be a really great panel. We had some time to talk with folks the other day, and I'm really excited about this conversation. I think I wanted to just share that I'm on a few boards. I'm also, I figure, somewhat a new-ish board member, although I've served on the Southern Appalachian Wilderness Stewards for 6 years, and I recently termed off. That was my first real board experience, and they made me the treasurer within about 6 months of my term there. And I'll speak a little bit more about that later, but I served as the treasurer for almost the entirety of my term. And then I also recently, I've only been on the board of Conservation and Recreation in Virginia for about a year. And due to the pandemic, we've only had a couple of board meetings, but having had that previous board service, I feel really confident on that board. I'm just really proud to be into a new board already. And then I'll just say, in my professional capacity, I also kind of manage and work with an advisory board. And so these are kind of a little bit different than the other boards that I mentioned. So I have some experience on that end. I'm going to pass it to Flora.
Good morning, everyone. It's terrible to follow Camilla, but I will do my best. I'm based in California as well. Grew up in Northern California and currently live in Vallejo in the northeast part of the San Francisco Bay Area. I gathered board and commission experience, some at a personal level and then a whole lot on a professional level. I'm also an avid sportswoman as of a couple of years ago. I grew up camping and hiking. And then took up hunting when I moved to Wisconsin a few years ago. I lived there for 5 years, but I counted as 6 because it was 5.5 winters, so I round up. And while I was in Wisconsin, I worked for a couple of elected officials. And one of my roles was as a director of appointments for the governor, which means I got to manage his appointments process, take in all of the folks who applied to state boards and commissions. So I'm happy to talk about statewide boards, commissions, councils. I'd love to answer any questions folks have, though of course it does vary state by state. I have personal experience serving on a nonprofit board, and it was a very similar experience where I was sort of voluntold for an executive position within the board. I was in college. It was a local nonprofit, and I think I just attended the wrong meeting because I left that first meeting as chair of the board, which felt really uncomfortable. But I learned a lot, and I think that's not an uncommon experience within all sorts of boards. I then later served as an advisory member of the statewide board in Wisconsin, also for a nonprofit, and enjoyed that. It was less of a working board. It was more of a share your input, call in occasionally. And then most recently, when I moved home to California, I tried to apply to be on a board for a hunting nonprofit and never got a response back. So I share all that to say that there's a huge spectrum in types of boards, in their scope, and how much or how little responsibility you might want to take on. So I will pause there and hand it to Lydia.
Welcome to Morado and Lydia Uncutts. And if you can't hear me or if I start chopping out, I'm so sorry, and I can totally turn my video off. I think that might help. But let me know, Marcia, or somebody wave at me if I start cutting out a lot. Okay, I hope I'm good for now. So I'm Lydia. I'm the executive director of a small nonprofit called Hunters of Color. And we are basically decolonizing hunting and indigenizing conservation, or re-indigenizing conservation, I should say. But I'm actually out here driving right now, as you could tell. We're at a archery day, and we've teamed up with Outdoor Afro here at the end of Black History Month to do an archery training course and event that starts in little under an hour or a little over an hour. So but I'm glad to be able to be here, and thanks to Artemis and Marcia for having us and for having me. When we first had a meeting with all these amazing women, I told Marcia, it was almost ironic because I told Marcia, wow, I feel intimidated by all of these incredible women with all these amazing leadership roles and positions. And I feel, I haven't been a board member for many things. And I felt a little bit, like in the shadow of these amazing women doing all these cool things. And then the next sentence I said was, I hope that what I can bring to women in this call is that we are so qualified and so powerful and so full of wisdom and generations and centuries of ancestral wisdom that we bring with us to any job experience or any board position or any volunteering that we might do. And the imposter syndrome that kicks in when I say, oh, I'm just an executive director and I'm talking to all these people who have amazing leadership roles and board positions. It was very ironic that those were two things that I said in almost the same sentence. And Marcia said that she wished that she could take the word just out of any woman's vocabulary, because I'm not just an executive director for a small nonprofit. I'm coming to this call with a lot of experience as someone who works directly with our board of directors and has been greatly blessed by their expertise. There's two, I wish I had a slideshow for you, but two women on our board who are just incredible. One who's in training to become an astronaut, and she also runs two nonprofits, so she has experience in all kinds of realms. And then another woman who runs her own business, creating equity in the outdoors and adventure. And she's an amazing mom, and she has so she's put in so much work to her business to raise funds, that she's been there for me as a working board member to help me write grants and to guide me along. And so anyways, I have this experience with our board and can tell you how important it is for our board members to be there, and that everything that they bring to the table has helped Hunters of Color. And when I say, you know, an amazing mom, her experience as a mother has helped take care of me as someone who's learning and growing. And so I think everything that women bring to these tables is so important and often so overlooked. And I just want everyone to feel encouraged by that there is a space for anybody on a board of directors, board of commissions, whether you're an astronaut or not. And so anyways, that's what I bring to this conversation. Would love to share what boards have meant to me and any experience I've had in this arena. So thanks so much for having me, Nyawankoa.
Yeah, thank you all for taking some time to introduce yourself. And I think in the 4 years that I've been with Artemis, one thing that I've noticed is how hung up people are on the word expert and what we think it takes to be an expert, and how unwilling we are to speak unless we view ourselves as an expert, instead of really owning that our experience, no matter where we are, has value. And that we can all learn from each other, no matter how many years we've been doing what we are doing. And that sometimes if you're talking to people who are just starting their journey, the most effective teacher is somebody who's just that one next rung up, instead of somebody who's, you know, reached the top 3 times over. And so I'm excited to have all of you here to have a really great conversation about boards and about how to find opportunities for boards. So thank you for being here. Camilla, I'm going to direct the first question to you. And again, a reminder to everybody that this is your primer on boards and commissions. So set us up with a strong foundation, Camilla. What are the responsibilities of a nonprofit board of directors? And then along with that, I think, what's a common misconception about what boards need from their members and what's the reality?
Okay, yeah, thanks. Well, so in my view, the primary responsibility is one that includes a word that is weird. It's fiduciary. Fiduciary responsibility. I mean, that's kind of the foundation on which your responsibility as a board member of a 501c3 has. And what that really means is that the board, each board member, not just the treasurer, and I tried to say this almost every time we reviewed the month budget or the annual budget or the audit or the tax return, I would say, guys, this is all these things that we're looking at, like the treasurer is partnering with the executive director to present these to you, but you need to each individually look over all of these documents and understand them. And if you don't understand them, that's okay, ask the questions. And so this fiduciary responsibility of overseeing the organization's finances, setting and approving a budget with the support of staff, that should be a given. The staff is there to support that. Fiduciary, FIDUCIARY. That somebody asked in the chat to spell out. Thank you. So overseeing the audit and the tax form, which is the 990. A good place to start is just finding a nonprofit organization that you know of and you like, and go to their website and look under their financials, and they should have their 990 there, and you can just kind of peruse it. Kind of looks like a tax return. It is a tax return. So there's that role, the fiduciary responsibility, and then there's the hiring of the executive director. That and kind of the supervision and holding accountable the executive director. So those were the two kind of things that I just held up in my head, like these two things I need to check off. And that's kind of why I accepted the role as a treasurer. So I thought, oh, I have to do this anyway, so I might as well, lead in this capacity and learn, really. And I think the reason why the board wanted me and asked me to assume that role was not because I had any technical training to review these documents, but I went through them and I literally asked all the dumb questions. Like, what is this? Why is it done this way? Wouldn't it be easier if you did it this way? And I guess, they really saw that as, wow, here's somebody who is doing that, is exhibiting their fiduciary responsibility and is curious and is asking questions and kind of getting to some of the problems or issues that the budget, or it was the budget at that time that the budget had. So those are the roles. And then I think just to add a little bit more to that, I also think that depending on the board and depending on how big or small it is, whether or not it has some committees, it might have a finance committee. Ours at Southern Appalachian Wilderness Stewards had a finance committee, and then a board development committee, and then they started having communications committee. And at some point they were struggling filling all of the committees. And I was like, look, our board at that time wasn't that big. And I said, look, I think we need to pull people back, because communications committee is a nice to have, but really the role of the board is the finances and is kind of general oversight of the organization, and not necessarily doing the communications work or setting communication strategy. That's the role of the staff. And so, my advice really is to keep the roles in mind. You could be pulled into doing other projects, and that would be extra in addition to your role as a board member. If you're going to volunteer to do staff work for free, that's fine. But just know what your role is going into it. Looking you could look at the bylaws. The bylaws of an organization will explain what each board member role is responsible for. And so if you're planning to join a board, or if somebody asks you to join a board, make sure you get those bylaws. Yeah, make sure the roles are documented. They should be documented in the bylaws. In addition to the bylaws, I would also ask to see the financials, and also ask to talk with a board member and understand, is this a working board? How much time am I going to put in on this? You want to go in with kind of clear understanding of what is going to be asked of you, and how much time you're going to spend. Initially, when I joined SAWS, Southern Appalachian Wilderness Stewards, I understood that it was a working board, and on the weekends. So I have a full-time job. I had a full-time job then too. So I'd put in my time with my organization, and then on the weekend, I would spend sometimes 5 or 6 or, occasionally more than that on the weekends doing some work for them. So just keep that in mind. And then in terms of misconception, so I think this was mentioned, but I will underscore this. The misconception really is that board members need to be executives or experts, like a lawyer or accountants. And you'll find literature on the internet that says that, get a lawyer on your board, fine, get a lawyer on your board, but not everybody needs to be a lawyer. And I hope that, and the reality is that you can kind of be like me, where you come in with not an expert in accounting at all, but I leveraged that opportunity to learn, to get that expertise, to ask questions. I mean, seriously, ask the dumb questions. They're actually not dumb questions. They never were. And if you can, look for boards that have seasoned professionals. I was lucky enough to be on a board with the former president of the Wilderness Society and somebody who just had a lot of experience in how boards are run. So I could learn from him to kind of see how that's done and also kind of shape how the board was going to be run going forward. So hopefully that's helpful, Marcia. And thank you for the question.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I think you bring up two good points. One is that if you're offered an opportunity to be on the board, then due diligence is something that you have the right to do, right? So look at the financials, ask the questions, sit down with the board member, understand what it is that you're getting yourself into fully, and don't be afraid to ask those questions. I do have a follow-up, and I'm curious, Lydia, if you could address this, because I do think Hunters of Color is in the perfect stage where you have an experience of having a working board and then transitioning to having a governing board now that you have staff. And so I'm curious, can you talk a little bit about the difference between a working board and a governing board?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are in that transition period. We did get enough funding this past year to be able to pay myself and actually 1.5 other staff members. So we have one more person who's full-time and then another person who's part-time, which is really exciting. And I think it took a lot of weight off of our board because for a while there, it was, all volunteer everything. So our board was all volunteer. I was completely volunteer. The other, we had a couple other people that were volunteering basically full time. And the board members were basically helping us get Hunters of Color off the ground, which is a whole nother, there should be all kinds of videos like this to teach people about how to start nonprofits also, because that's a whole other can of worms. That's a lot of work. And we would not have been able to do this if it wasn't for our board, working board at the time, being willing to say, yes, I do have experience with finances and can help you with X, Y, and Z. Or yes, I do have experiences with bylaws and with, strategic planning and even job positions and roles and HR hiring, that kind of thing. But it's been great to see that natural transition really from the board having to bring all of that experience and utilize it a lot. And so I think in startup phases, that's really common for boards to be more working, less governance or advisory. And now we're able actually, now that we have staff, now that we have people that are paid to do budgeting and to do, we're able to contract actual accountants, and we're able to I have an assistant now. It's really exciting to be able to now, when something comes up and we have our board meetings, now I can ask for advice rather than saying, hey, can someone please help with double checking the budget for the end of year, and they'll do that anyways with the fiduciary responsibilities. But it's been interesting to see that transition. And I think it probably is, and anyone can probably jump in and speak on this too. I think that probably is just a really natural transition, right? From having more working board members at the beginning to now being able to rely on them as advisory and governance for the further growth and the staff members doing more of the actual work. But yeah, it's interesting and all so important. Wouldn't be here without our board. So
it's perfect depiction of the difference. Thank you. And I think, when we're talking specifically about conservation organizations, I know with the National Wildlife Federation affiliates, we have boards of all sizes, organizations of all sizes. And so we have some organizations that have no paid staff. They're solely a board of directors doing really important conservation work in the state. And then we have organizations that are larger and have significant staff. And so then the board does operate much more like an advisory board. And so there are a bunch of different opportunities out there. And And as part of the due diligence, I think it's important to ask, is this a working board or is it an advisory board? And that will give you a lot of information. I'm going to transition us a little bit and talk about commissions. I think there's a big learning curve when it comes to understanding commissions and councils and what they do and what they are. So Flora, give us a 101 on commissions. What are they and how do they work?
Yeah, happy to. I'll start sort of big picture with the main buckets and types, and then we can also talk about how these commissions work at a granular meeting by meeting level. So what they're like once you're on the commission, because it sounds like folks who have joined the chat this morning are ready to serve, interested to serve, know that you, and like my co-panelists said, that you do have something worth sharing, that you are an expert in the skills that you have picked up in life and in your career along the way. And I really want to underscore what's already been said, that yes, you should apply. On occasion, you will be reached out to and asked to apply, but in most cases, and it sounds like all of us have had this experience, you will be the one to go and get it. And there is room for women on these boards and commissions. We need to absolutely create more room and space and support for female voices and voices of color, and especially for women of color. But to demystify the process, I'd love to add my 2 cents of how these boards and commissions work. So at a high level, America runs on commissions. We run on subcommittees. As a country, we've always broken into smaller groups so that we can communicate more smoothly, and so that we can really hone in on an issue, on an area of expertise, and to form a study group. So you'll see that elected officials at every level of government are assigned committees that they attend, because this is, as a democracy, so far, this is the best way we've determined to get work done. And I'm sure in group projects you've been a part of, or wherever people gather in big groups, at some point you go into breakout rooms, right? Or you go into a smaller, more focused discussion and chat. And for that reason, state commissions and boards can be a central hub of information. They really dive deep into fish and game codes, perhaps, or conservation. What's new in conservation in your state, in your county, or in your city. So I want to be very clear that there are different scopes. Maybe you feel called to a statewide, to serve at a statewide level. Maybe you feel called to really focus in at your city level. A position can be tailored for you. Whatever your interest is, maybe you want to put in more bike lanes in your county. I assure you there is a board of committed, passionate citizens who works on that. And I want to also underscore how exciting it is. I think a common misconception is that board meetings are really stuffy or that they're hyper formal. That can certainly be true. It depends on, again, the type of board. But there are also really different ways to engage where it's not so structured. I'll put it that way. And then let me just also mention that there are 3 major ways that I'm aware of. I'd love for folks to chime in, but 3 major avenues of getting on a board. One is being appointed, which is my background and experience, where an elected official needs to essentially endorse you, and then you would serve on that governmental board. And typically there's a confirmation process. You've probably seen some televised confirmation processes at the federal level, maybe even at the state level. The second method is to run for a board where an election is involved. So here it's school board, maybe it's your park district board. where it's a bigger several month process. And then the third general category, I'll just call it a free-for-all, where people really need board members. There's a whole lot of vacancies, and maybe there is an application, or maybe you simply email the person and say, I'd like to serve. Maybe they meet you for coffee, and then you're on the board. So there's a whole lot of ways to do this. In a governmental setting, on a board and commission, it's going to be an appointment. Typically, there's an application involved, and I can answer more questions about that. And then once, I just also want to remind folks that there's, if you submit an application, sometimes you're immediately appointed. Take that into consideration. On the complete opposite end of the spectrum, it might be years before your application comes up. I'm thinking specifically of statewide fish and game commissions. Typically, those are highly competitive. There can be hundreds of applicants, and if the governor is the appointing authority, it would take, within their 4 years of time as governor, they might only be able to appoint 1, 2, or 3 folks during that cycle. So keep that in mind, and maybe that's what you want to do. And so timing, if you're planning ahead for that, timing can be a big piece of that. And then I'll close out with the granular level of how boards and commissions work. Within the meeting, the chair will run the meeting. There's an executive team, like we covered. There's typically a vice president. There's a secretary and maybe a treasurer. They might meet more often behind the scenes. And then the length of the meeting can really depend. If it's a board that meets quarterly, is it a board that meets monthly? Are you on the executive subcommittee where you would meet maybe twice a month? Some board meetings take the whole day and there's a stipend involved. Maybe there's reimbursement for mileage. It really, really depends on the board. But I want to say that all of that information is publicly available. If you have your eye on a certain board, go read their minutes from the past meeting. Look at if they do reimburse board members. I am personally of the opinion every board should offer a stipend. They don't have to pay their board members, but it can be an expensive, not expensive, but a time-consuming process depending on the board. But again, there is a level of involvement out there for you. And someone said it earlier that you can be involved at any level in any manner that makes sense to you, where your point of passion is. There really are so many types and such a rainbow of boards and commissions that just getting out there and finding the information, I think it will naturally take you from there in that process.
That's great, thank you. If anybody has any follow-up questions, please again drop them in the chat or drop them in the Q&A. We do have some time, so we will be able to get to some of them. And one that was submitted in the Q&A, Camilla, I'm going to direct this to you, but everybody please feel free to contribute your thoughts. The question is, when seeking board positions, I realized that so many discuss the financial contribution aspect of being on a board. I have a pretty set budget and don't have much to contribute financially. How do those of us in lower income brackets navigate these financial contribution discussions?
Wow, that's a great question, and one that I've actually thought about a lot. So that's a question that you'll want to ask a board if you're talking to them about joining, just to get what their policy is. I know that some places have a threshold where you either have to pay it or raise it. So there could be a number of ways in which you could meet that threshold. But I think more often than not, what I've seen, and at least how I operate my advisory board, is like $1 is fine. It's really the reason why I think, in addition to the kind of financial contribution that nonprofits need to and rely on to operate, It's more about when you apply to a foundation, they have a question. And this may be a question, you know, the philanthropic community needs to kind of reconsider, but as it historically, they've asked, you know, what percentage of your board gives to your organization? And if that organization applying for that funding says, you know, 60%, 75%, the question is like, oh, so your board doesn't like believe in your organization 100% enough to like, you know, put some skin in the game, put some money in there. And so what we've always said, at least at SAW, is we've said like just anything counts, like donate $1, donate $5, whatever your budget is, we have a level for you, you're welcome, please donate that. Do not feel any pressure that you have to make some big commitment if that's not for you. So I would say those are the organizations that you probably would want to gravitate toward. So yeah, but I know it's especially if I've always thought about, you know, if you have some kind of asset that can also somewhat be quantified, like if you are working, you know, if you do have some kind of professional capacity and you could say, I'm donating this in kind, I don't know if that would qualify. So that would be another question you would ask. But hopefully that's not too much of a barrier. It shouldn't be. And you should definitely kind of push an organization to think outside the box about that financial commitment.
Thank you. You know, I've heard, I can't remember where, but, you know, the 3 W's that every board needs is wealth, wisdom, and work. And I think that can be the part of the conversation too, if they're an organization does need to be flexible, especially if what they're seeking is diverse perspectives and inclusive perspectives. They need to understand that they may need to change their expectations and how things have been done in order to get that, and that there are a number of other W's where we can contribute if wealth is not one of them. Real quick, I want to touch base with panelists. If you are responding to the chat, make sure that you're responding to everyone, because sometimes it just goes to hosts and panelists, and so then the community isn't able to see your message. So just check on that. Flora, I wanted to go back to you and scroll up in the chat just a little bit to see if I can find a question. Where was it? Flora. Nope, that's not it. Bear with me.
Was it the one about general qualifications?
That was
yes.
it.
Yeah, I tried to find it just now too, and apologies.
There it is. Okay, general qualifications someone would need to serve at state or local government positions and roles.
This is going to be my classic cop-out answer that it totally depends on that specific board, committee, or council. I will say, when I was the director of appointments, of the hundreds of positions that the governor had appointing authority to, I mean, it was over 200 boards. Within those boards, there are anywhere from 1 seat that he could appoint to 20 seats. And of the thousands of positions he had appointing authority to around the state, maybe 40% of those were really prescriptive positions. I'll give an example. Some of our medical boards, you had to be someone with a license for more than 5 years, or this board needs 4 cosmetologists and 3 dentists who are retired. I don't know. I mean, some of them were just really specific. I do think some of the hunting and fishing commissions around the country will require that you have a hunting or fishing license for a certain number of years. Again, all of that is online. That goes for counties and cities as well. Some of them, might require that you have lived in the city a certain amount of time. Some of them might require, yeah, that you be a lawyer. But I just want to say most of these boards have an at-large position or a position that a member of the public is appointed to, where you need no other qualification other than being a living, breathing member of the public. And so there's a lot of ways to get involved. Start poking around on websites. Get a friend to do it with you. If that's what's feeling overwhelming, apply along with a friend. Look around. Some of these boards have had vacancies for years, and they will be glad to get your application. And it's a remarkable way to network, to be exposed to these central hubs of information, to share your input. So don't let qualifications hold you back. I'm hearing that repeatedly. I'm hearing that, oh, I need more training or education, that I need to be an expert. There are all kinds of people serving on boards, and I think we can improve the level of quality on many of our boards and commissions. And so the fact that you all are spending your Saturday morning thinking about this, dreaming for the future and planning on it, you are qualified. You clearly care, and that's a huge component of it. So it's just like a job description. Take the qualifications with a grain of salt. Apply anyway. Then you have your board application material ready for the next time, and you have a specific toolkit that life has blessed you with. You are going to bring input and a new point of view to this board no matter what. So yes, read the qualifications. And apply anyway. That's my advice.
I love that advice. And that reminder is like, don't tell yourself no, let somebody else do it.
Yeah, make someone else do it, and then make them explain why they told you no, because you are ready for this. It's and again, maybe maybe you don't go for the president of the Fish and Game Commission right away, right out of the gate. Some of the best career advice I ever received was to surround yourself by the people you want to be with, those whose knowledge you want to take in. And it's true in work as well. If in your professional life, if you want to be on a board and commission, maybe start listening in on these meetings. People love informational, informal coffee interviews. Reach out to folks. Surround yourself, go to their events, steep yourself in this subject matter. There's so many virtual ways to do it, which is just incredible now. But there's marinate yourself in it.
Wonderful, thank you. There's a question in the chat that I definitely want to make sure we get to, and I'm just going to open it up to the panel as a whole. If you have a response to this question, please feel free to share it. The question is, if you have experienced gatekeeping by other women, will you please talk about how you navigated that?
Yeah, that's a hard one. Yeah, it does happen. I don't know. I mean, I don't really know how to phrase this, but yeah, it hurts more when it's another woman doing it. And at the same time, it's just the nature of group projects. It's just like there's personalities, and some women are gatekeepers, some men are gatekeepers. Surrounding yourself with what the person you want to be, the board member you want to be, is part of it, which is not really a very helpful answer, but I I think it definitely happens.
I can jump in if it's okay. I think this is something that, I mean, it's hurtful when anyone gatekeeps anything. But I think that when I've experienced it, it's people telling me that we're doing things wrong. Or like the order of events. Like, for example, we started running programming and we're just paying, out of our own pockets before we officially got our 501c3. And I was told by a woman I looked up to that we did that wrong, that we needed to get our 501c3 and then wait until we started doing programming, but it worked. And that was one of the hardest things though for me, was how many, you did this wrong, this was out of order, you needed to raise X amount of funds before you started helping people, that kind of thing. And that was what was really hard for me, having a woman that I looked up to tell me that we're doing things wrong and telling me in front of a bunch of people that we were doing things backwards. Because I don't think that there is a how-to playbook for a lot of these things. And so I think that the best thing that we can do for each other is to watch when even things that we've had experience with, when that becomes gatekeeping because we think things should be done a certain way, right? Because there isn't a playbook and there isn't a all-knowing answer guide for all of these things. Life is so nuanced. And so I think one of the best things that we can do to avoid that is, I was just writing a response to Sally, who asked if you need to serve on a nonprofit board before starting a nonprofit. And I was saying no, because I'm living proof that you don't have to. There's people that tell you, yes, you absolutely have to. And I think it's probably amazing experience, and it probably would have been better for me to have that experience, but I didn't. And I'm living proof that you don't have to take a step-by-step to get to where you want to be. Go for it. And that's something that we as women do not do because of imposter syndrome. Go for it. do what you think needs to be done, and do so obviously in a calculated way. But if you have passion, you have that for a reason, and you have people behind you, then go for it. I don't think there's ever any reason to block yourself or others.
Thank you, Flora and Lydia, very much for that, for addressing that question. Hi, Judy. How are you this morning?
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I've been diligently waiting till 12:55 to log in with the time difference. I put it in my calendar for 12:55, so I am very, very sorry. Other than that, I'm great.
Yeah.
Not your fault. Your email
Yeah.
clearly said 11:55 Eastern time. I just had it backwards.
Time zones are the bane of my existence. We're trying to work nationally.
Sorry.
No, they are tricky. But thank you for hopping on. And why don't you take us out, bring us home with our last question. What is one suggestion you have for women on finding opportunities to serve on a board or a council?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think for me, the hardest thing is honestly is finding women who are interested in being on council. So I have to work really hard I've got a number of boards. So where I sit that I make recommendations or point people to, but people usually bring me like a list of these are our recommendations, and I'm all, they'll bring me 5 people, and every single one of them is a man, and I'll say, are there any women that we could promote or try and include? And so it's a challenge because there's not as many women, particularly where I am, to sort of draw from, or at least not that we know about, right? So I think making your making it known that you are interested or available, or that you have these certain skills, I mean, there are so many opportunities to contribute, but it's not that easy to know who's sort of available or willing or has the time. I mean, that's some of the the challenge I see with a lot of these positions is many of the meetings happen during the workday, and folks don't always have, I mean, this is the struggle I constantly wrestle with, because, you know, we will pay for mileage or, you know, a small stipend, but these are not paid positions. So people are taking time out of their day, usually out of the workday, or, you know, to attend a hearing in the evenings. And so it's a challenge, and it's a lot to ask of people. And I only have so many friends. I only know so many people, right, in my circle. And so reaching out to people and letting them know that you're interested and available, I think is the first step. And then I think, you know, kind of showing up, doing the homework, and, you know, if you have, I mean, a lot of times there are, like, say, public comments that you have to review, and a rule proposal that you might be, you know, going to provide feedback on. So do the homework before you get there, and then, you know, engage. And I find for myself that at least the after I joined one board, I got invited to join, like, every, you know, once your sort of name and face gets out there, people realize, oh, she can do this, she's great. And you'll get a lot more opportunities, I think, but it's that first step that sometimes is a big one to step. And I'll be honest, like, and I said this to folks just the other day, as one of the few, and this is so typical, I think, of my gender, female gender anyway. You know, I'm one of the few state directors that's a woman. So I've been invited to be on all these boards, and I totally undermine myself and say, oh, I'm just invited because I'm, like, the only woman and they need a woman. There's not that many other female directors, instead of being like, no, I'm pretty good at this stuff. I know what I'm doing. Like, I deserve to be on this board. I'm not on this board just because I'm a woman, but in my head, like, I still think, well, I was just invited to be on this pretty awesome board because you're one of the few state directors that are women, and they need more women. So, but, you know, that I think is one of the failings, or not a failing, but one of the challenges that women have, is we tend to undersell ourselves or underestimate our abilities and capabilities. So, you know, get on that board. And this is my other bit of advice, is the first board I ever went to, and we sat at a table, and I didn't know you're supposed to sit at the table. So I sat outside the table, and then somebody told me, you've got to sit at the table. But so I'm like, all right. So, and then, you know, I got some guidance. I said, sit at the table and use your voice. And it's taken me a long time to learn how to use my voice, right, to speak up. So my recommendation to folks is to get on a board and then use your voice, speak up, speak your mind, you know, come ready to engage and prepare, and really you'll be amazing. And then there'll be all kinds of other opportunities, probably more opportunities than you want, but there'll be lots of other opportunities presented, I'm sure. I don't know if that's even close to answering your question.
Yeah, no, it was great. And I think you're right. I think what I've noticed both in leadership and in just general advocacy, the second sportswoman raises her hand and says, I am interested in getting engaged, opportunity is not going to be the problem. Too much opportunity might be the problem. And then learning how to say no is definitely a good skill to have.
Yeah, it's not easy to do.
No, it's not. And
somebody knows the trick to that, and I'd love to hear it.
Or knows, and there's a transition. I've definitely gotten better at it the older that I get and the more experience that I have at it. But there's a transition to where so where you don't say it and you're not comfortable saying it, to where you do say it and you're not comfortable saying it. Well, I'm hoping finally where you say it and you're comfortable saying it. Still waiting for that one, but be kind to yourself during that transition.
Right.
Lydia, I wanted to give you an opportunity to mention the opportunity that you have.
Yeah, we did just open up another position because we hired one of our board members who is now a staff member. So we have an open board member position, and I put my email in the chat, and I hope that Marcia can share my email with anyone who attended as well. I don't know if that's in the works, but would love to be a resource for people in the future, especially about anyone who's interested in nonprofit work as well. I'd love to share how we did what we did and how things went well and things that didn't go so well. But we do have a board member position open. And the last thing that I wanted to say that I mentioned to the group of panelists before is that I met with a woman named Leslie who runs Loa Boots in the United States of America. Loa is a hunting boot company or trail boot company based out of Europe, but she runs all of the US line. And she told me just last week or the week before that she gets so many resumes from women for jobs that they have like apologies on them. They'll say, sorry, I don't know if this is what you wanted, or like, I feel like I'm not qualified, sorry for even applying, like that kind of thing. So women, and she'll look at the resume and be like, wow, this person's incredible. This is exactly what we need. But their resume, they're apologizing before even, starting the job or even having an interview. And then she'll have resumes from their male counterparts and who are just so confident and know that they're the ones for the job. And then she'll read the resume and be like, wait a minute, you're not qualified at all. And so she's looking at these different resumes for the same position. She's like, man, if women had that confidence. So what I'm saying is, even if you feel like you don't have it, fake it till you make it. Apply with confidence to these sorts of positions. Even if you're like, hey, maybe I'm not qualified. Don't tell them that. Tell yourself, yes, you are qualified, because you are, and we need more women's voice in leadership, especially in the outdoors. So you are qualified, believe it. And if you don't believe it, fake it till you make it, and you will be qualified. But we need that confidence as women in the outdoors. And I'm glad you're all here. And this makes me really excited to see all of you being interested in this. So thank you so much, Marcia and Artemis, for having us.
Yeah, that is the perfect note to end this panel on. Thank you, Lydia. Camilla, Flora, Judy, Lydia, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. And we did have a question from one of our attendees about leaving email or contact info for everybody, panelists, participants. If that's something you're comfortable dropping in the chat, do so. And we will keep track of them, and also feel free to email artemis@nwf.org if you're particularly interested in getting in touch with somebody, and I'm happy to connect you. Thank you for this wonderful panel. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your insight. It was wonderful having you here, and we will see you all again soon.